So thank you so much for being here, Milan. We really appreciate your time. I can only imagine that your life must be very busy. So we are so privileged to have a South African icon, a mom, a businesswoman, a mindfulness expert at our beck and call. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I deserve all of those accolades, but thank you for inviting me. This is such a passion of mine. Mindfulness is such an important topic to talk about. So I'm grateful to be here.
We are so grateful to have you because I don't I don't profess to know everything about mindfulness, but I do know that mindfulness has become incredibly important in the digital era. But first thing first, let's just talk about my story tribe. So my kids absolutely adore these journals. You can see here, my story tribe is very high up in the agenda. That's what they do on the weekends. And there's the castle. So I've got a very Indian looking sort of castle here that's been drawn. And
I
then
love the creativity.
and then who do you know who laughs loudly? It was mom. Can you believe it? I laughed so
Amazing.
loudly at that. But anyway, they love these journals. I think these journals are amazing. And I love
Thank you.
the philosophy around My Story Tribe. I think it's so interesting. Don't you want to tell us why you started this movement? What triggered you to start?
Well, I think it all started with story. Story has always been a big part of my life. I'm an actor and a director. I wrote a screenplay. I started a children's book publishing company. So story in all its forms have always been a big part of my life. But I realized that story for me is a way that I understand and process the world and what's happening in the world. So every character that I play, every storyline that I write, every plot twist that I interpret as a creative is a way for me to understand life. And I find that story is a very powerful tool for other people as well to make sense of their world. It can teach, it can comfort, um, or maybe just reflect what we feel. And and that's why I decided to use story as a mechanism to help specifically children in the 6 to 13-year-old age group to make sense of their world, but also to create a vehicle for them to grow emotionally, and obviously tap into that whole practice of mindfulness. Because when we reflect on our own life, that's when we take time to sit still, become quiet, become present, and then we are able to process all of these things that happen to us. And I specifically targeted or decided to target the 6 to 13-year-old age group because as parents we focus so much on early child development.
Mm.
We are very present then, but then when we drop them off at school we tend to forget and drop them off and then we drop the ball, and we only wake up again when we have the screaming volatile teenager staring us in the face. And obviously, the start of the My Story Tribe was initiated by my own experience with my children. I don't want to go into too much detail, but there were a few reasons why that struggle with emotion, struggle with self-regulation became a problem. And as a parent, I needed something to help my child understand who they are, but also develop grit and develop resilience. And yeah, so I teamed up with psychologists and occupational therapists, and we started developing tools to assist these primary school kids with their emotional growth and essentially their mental health.
I absolutely love that. And I love the root in story because so much of our tribalism, we come from tribes, we sat around the fireplace, we shared stories. That's how we made sense of the world. But yet, with technology entering the equation, we've moved so far away from sort of that evolutionary need. Um, Tell me, do you think that technology has made being a parent more complicated?
I think yes and no. In terms of support for me as a parent, it is a great plus because I remember when I was pregnant with my first child and I had the stack of books next to my bed. But one night when I had to figure out how to deal with reflux. And in between these spurts of projectile vomit, there was no time to whip through these pages and try and find what reflux was, where now we can just, information is easily accessible. I'm also part of a very, very supportive social media group for parents. So in that way, it's a plus for me as a parent, but navigating, leading my children and facilitating their growth, it makes it much more complicated, because we need to figure out what this technology thing is. And we all know it's not all bad, but we need to figure out what the balance is. And I think that the most difficult thing for me is that I realized the technology culture in my household is going to be different from yours because of who we are, who the individuals are in our households. So I can't even ask you to give me all the answers. I need to sort of find that technology culture within my family and within my household. And that is tricky. It really is.
Absolutely. I absolutely love the word technology culture, because, as part of some of our online courses, we actually do a tech charter, and we get families to write a charter for their home, for tech use in their home. And it can include things like, in this house, we prioritize board games over online games, or in this house, screen time is enjoyed. It's not a guarantee, or and it's got these sort of like mantras for screen usage. But how do you think screens have impacted on teenagers' ability to switch off and be mindful?
Oh, I think the problem lies within the quick gratification. Just the action of scrolling means that our teenagers now have a change of information in milliseconds, new information in milliseconds. So they don't have patience.
Yes, that's so interesting.
I think standing still and understanding and appreciating silence, that doesn't exist, because they get new information with every scroll. And that is difficult for them. And it's also, we can't expect their brains to be comfortable with silence and to be comfortable with not all of those stimulus,
Yes.
if that is what the brain is used to. So we need to create time for them to not have that stimulus all the time, that we need to create time for them to be bored. And that is quite difficult. I think the instant gratification is the problem. Our children nowadays, they are not patient. They don't have to wait for anything. And I think that is the most difficult thing about rearing tweens and teens, is to make them understand and make them used to, you said now sitting around the fire with stories. We always talk about what it is about sitting around a fire specifically, and driving on the long road in a car together. That is so powerful in terms of connection and conversation. We've lost the art of conversation. So when you sit around a fire, they say, I don't know who they are, but they say 7 minutes. 7 minutes of an uncomfortable silence, of staring into the flames, of listening to the crackling of the fire, and then a conversation starts. And the same in a car when you go for a long drive. If you don't have your child's playlist on the radio, but then 7 minutes, and then there's a bit of a uncomfortable silence, and you see the scenery around you, and you hear the car on the tar, the tires on the tar, and then conversation starts. And we need to create those moments more, I think, to help our children to relearn the art of conversation and connection.
So connection that's so interesting, because, I grew up in Joburg, and we lived 25 kilometers from school. So we sat in the traffic every day. I probably sat in the traffic about 2.5 hours every day, to and fro from school. And my mom and I have got a very, very close bond. And I think it is because we were stuck in traffic together. And we had to
Yes.
talk. And if you're sitting with someone in a car for 45 minutes and there's no devices, I mean, back then we didn't have phones or anything, and you're sitting there, then eventually the nuts and bolts of your day do come spilling out of your mouth, whether you like it or not, because the silence, 45 minutes of silence is just too long to bear. So we
Yes.
actually have a very close relationship as a result. But I think today we always have devices with us. I speak to primary school parents, primary school teachers who say, children have iPads in the car. And so that conversation that you speak of is not sparked. The kids are not sparked. And then the other thing that you mentioned is the boredom factor. I always say my greatest, the thing that keeps me up at night is that the next Frida Kahlo is somewhere on an iPad, not bored, and she's never going to pick up a paintbrush and actually try to put something together,
Exactly.
Isn't it
Exactly.
true that creativity comes from boredom? Because your child is born bored, they go into the attic, they find that violin that, yeah, the great aunt left there, and oh wow, what is this thing? And then there's Mozart. Mozart is born. So yeah, there is a lot to be said for boredom. Tell me, what benefits do you think a family that prioritizes mindfulness can enjoy?
I think the most prominent benefit is connection. Um, when we allow and we understand the practice of mindfulness, we allow for the quiet time. We connect again. I think specifically in this day and age when we are so busy, parents are busy, we have deadlines, we have our own stresses, children, their programs are so jam-packed. So we all tend to, when we get a moment, shut the door, we take our device and we just get lost in whatever it is that we like. So even in the moments that we do have a moment for connection, we don't. We use technology to escape.
Yes.
But if we practice mindfulness, if we learn how to sit and reflect, if we learn how to meditate, if we learn how to journal or use time to just to spend with our own thoughts and with our own feelings, then we tend to connect easier. And Dr. Gabor Mate said that parenting is not a role, essentially. It's not a role or a responsibility, it's a relationship. And I find if we can connect again with our kids and use that time to connect, and if they also understand what mindfulness, reflection, and connection is, then relationships are built. And I've got two teenagers now, and if we don't have a good relationship, I cannot make rules. I cannot enforce rules. Everything ends up in conflict. But if there's a relationship and if there's a connection, it makes it a lot easier.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that. I think that's so important. Tell me, so what do you do with your teens as a family? What do you do to have those mindful moments? I mean, I'm sure you have an incredibly busy life. How do you prioritize the occasional digital detox? And how do you inspire them to do the same?
I think it gets increasingly more difficult, as they grow, and I think the teenage years specifically, because they have such strong minds of their own. We had more definite rules when they were younger. There was more. The guidelines and the boundaries were clear. So many hours, or not before bedtime, or this is where your device goes, or so that was easier. I remember we had at one point, I think they were around 10, 11, we had something called Screen Free Sunday. And that was, well, it was easy, I think easier for us because we are in Cape Town and we do have the beach and we do have the mountain. So it's easier to use your Sunday to connect in nature. But I remember one specific evening, it was winter and we were all in the living room around the fire or in front of the fire. And my husband and I, we really like to debate. And we love we love the art of conversation. We love to ask questions and challenge each other. And we also want our children to hear that and eventually take part in that, because let's face it, our children need to know how to ask the right questions, not necessarily have all the answers. And so that particular evening, I think it was around the Me Too movement. So we were talking about equality. And the debate got quite heated. And I mean, we were in it, and it was wonderful because we had difference of opinion. And that conversation is always, between my husband and I, quite healthy. So it was a heated conversation, but we were on a roll, and I think 10 minutes passed, and the kids were just sitting there. And at one point, my son just looked at me and he said, "Mom, you two sound like a very boring YouTube video."
No.
Because that's their reference, because my husband do like to listen to or watch debates on YouTube, and I think that's the reference that they have. And so that was then. But now that they're teenagers, we have less specific boundaries and rules and more conversation. So I would see that my daughter gets more snippy with me, and we will have a conversation about, I think she's been on TikTok for too long, and I think that has an impact on her emotions. Can we chat about that? And don't you think that let's just not do TikTok for a day, or maybe let's limit it to half an hour and see if that changes how you feel. So it becomes more of a conversation now that they are teenagers.
How does she respond to that? How does she respond to that introduction? But I guess you've laid the foundation for open conversation from a very early age. So maybe that conversation is easier.
I think it's easier because they know that their opinion is valued, so they are heard. But let's not make a mistake. I mean, if hormonally, it depends. It depends where she's at, So that suggestion might not land very well one day, and it might the next. So sometimes those suggestions or those conversations, they do tank, and that they're not as effective. And I'm still the parent, so I can still say, okay, so now I'm telling you to leave the phone for a day or whatever,
Yeah. But I love that there's open discourse, and I love that there's a sort of a culture of debating and a culture of respecting each other's opinions. I think that is actually a wonderful way of working with teenagers. I find I worked with the matrics the last 2 weeks I've been working with matrics, and I find that if you do give them that respect and there is that foundation for open conversation, that they're a lot more responsive, than to this authoritative sort of, these are the rules and don't you, I think at that age they do need to be respected as almost adults, Just back to the My Story Tribe journals, how do My Story Tribe journaling help a child to be more mindful?
Well, I think very subtly we introduce the art of journaling right from the very first journal. The green journal is for 6 to 10-year-olds. So in that journal, we do activity. There's no intimidating blank pages. So we don't expect them to just blurt out their emotions on the page. I mean, a lot of them can't write at that stage. But we introduce aspects of journaling, but we want them to experience the benefits of journaling. So for instance, in the green journal, there is one page where the prompt just is, on this page, I practice my signature. And the result of that is affirmation. It is a form, it is a sense of self.
Yeah.
And that is what you want. That's what you want journaling to essentially be. There's another page where we just say, how many stars for? And then you can choose how many stars for broccoli. How many stars do you give sleepovers or pizza or tattoos? And again, it's a sense. the result of that, yes, I love that page.
I actually never knew my daughter doesn't like broccoli. She's always just eaten it. But there's only one star at the broccoli. So it was quite a surprise to me. I didn't know that. And
Okay.
I also had no idea. So here with the carrot, there's a side note written, cooked or not. Like if it's cooked, I don't like it as much as raw, like type of thing. But yeah,
There
it's
you
an incredible source of affirmation.
It's affirmation. And then further on in the journal, it's less about it's affirmation or self esteem. It goes to self regulation. It goes to my relationships and my emotions around that. So that is how we introduce the art of journaling. And in that sense, I think journaling is a powerful, powerful mindfulness practice. So, and because my daughter has dyslexia, so how could I expect her to enjoy the art of journaling? But it's all about writing. Yeah. And that's why these monkey puzzle options is a good way for them to start and to really physically feel in their body how good it feels to reflect.
Absolutely. And I've been looking for a My Story Tribe journal for myself. I want one that's for 39-year-olds because I look over the children's shoulder and I was like, well, I'd love to do that. You get sucked in. You think, oh, this is fun. I also want to be a part of this. So I think you need to bring out an adult range as well.
Yeah, we have the third journal we released is an art journal, and it's amazing how parents they order the art journal for their child and then they order another one for themselves. So yeah, people, we all want to tap into that again.
Oh, that's fantastic. Milan, we're almost finished. I just want to ask you one last question. If you had to give parents one piece of advice, if you had the opportunity to speak to the parents of the world and you could give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
I guess that you should prioritize mindfulness and your own mental health. Because I can give a lot of advice on parenting in general, but we can't be good parents. We can't even just be good enough parents if we are not in a healthy place ourselves. So be attuned to your own emotions and your own your mental state, and take time to find your own balance, because then you will be the best parent that you can be.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I think that's so powerful. And I think as parents, we are so quick to neglect our own well-being and our own health in general. You have symptoms, a symptom that you would take your child to the doctor for immediately, you ignore for days before you actually do something about it. So I totally understand. I think that's so powerful. And you cannot be a good parent if you're not in a good place yourself, and if you don't spend that time on yourself, just to reflect and to ensure that you are also in a good, healthy mental space.
Yes, I think that one of the other things that is very sad about the effect of social media is comparison. And we talk about a lot to our kids about that they shouldn't compare. But boy, do we compare. As parents, as mothers, I'm not good enough at that. And, we are so hard on ourselves. And if we learn to just take a moment to appreciate and validate ourselves, then that comparison will also get less, I think. And we will also stand taller in our own choices as a parent.
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the comparison loop, when I speak to teenagers, we speak about the pressure to be perfect, and about comparison will steal your joy. And often what you see is just the highlights reel. You don't see the bloopers that happen behind the scenes. And we often have that conversation, and it's something that teenagers often say, well, my mom compares herself and my dad compares himself. And, we compare ourselves to our immediate circle, but it's also a worldwide popularity contest to keep up, and it's exhausting and it's so unnecessary. So I totally agree.
I also think it's not easy not to compare. We all fall into that trap. I think it's the easiest thing to do. And that's why in my own social media, on my social media platforms, I try my best to be authentic. Well, I think that I've decided, I've made a choice that authenticity should be the culture of my feeds. I don't want people to look at my feed and not feel good about themselves. So I had to ask the question, what can I do on my feed that does not spark that comparison?
Yes.
And I think authenticity is it. So I try not to I sometimes use a black and white filter, but apart from that, I don't use filters. And I'm mindful to post also the things that's not so perfect, because I think we need those feeds. I follow people that are raw and authentic and honest, and I'm filled and empowered by those feeds.
I agree. And I also worry about the time spent to create that perfection. I think about, I mean, I made a reel the other day. It took me half an hour to get it the way I wanted it to be. It was for work. But if that becomes your personal life, if you're spending half an hour to create the perfect reel or the perfect photograph, that's half an hour that you're not spending connecting with your child or being present. And that concerns me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the level of perfection, because today only one type of filter is enough, but then next week I feel like I need something more, and then I need something more, and then where is perfection then? we keep reaching, and that also is not being mindful, because I think being mindful is being present, and being mindful is being here as it is now. And we've lost that.
And using your senses to absorb the world around you. And as soon as you put a screen between yourself and the experience, you're not using your senses to absorb that experience.
Yes. Even taking photographs. When my child in primary school started with sport, I had my phone up to record and to take pictures while he was in the game, and then realized afterwards that I wasn't in the game. I didn't watch the game, and I made the choice. And I hope that there's a parent or a photographer that will send me the pictures afterwards, because I would like to have them, but I cannot view and cannot be present in that situation while looking through a lens.
Absolutely. I always tell parents in my workshops, I say to them, I've got a photo album of 30 photos of my entire childhood, and I'm okay. I'm okay. You don't actually have to record every moment of their childhood for it to be valid or a good, healthy, happy childhood.
Yes.
And what I often do is at a school concert, when it's my child's turn to sing or whatever it is, I just ask a friend, can you make a video so I can watch? And that works well. You get to absorb it, but you also have record of it if you needed that.
Yeah. I also find that it's quite tricky, and I would like to one day find out psychologically what effect it has, that children nowadays grow up in front of themselves. I didn't see myself so often when I was a child. You maybe took one picture and then you had to wait 2 months and to get it developed, and then there were a few duds in the packet. Nowadays it's instant. I take the picture, I look at it, and I judge myself, or I see myself. There was one stage where my daughter stopped smiling for pictures because she had a gap between her front teeth, and she noticed that, and she stopped smiling.
I wonder what that does to identity formulation, in an adolescent, how
exactly.
you formulate your own identity based on what you're constantly looking at.
Yes.
And evaluating.
So I feel as parents, we often pressure our kids to take pictures. Come on now, stand here. We need to take a picture. I want to remember this moment. And a lot of our kids don't want to take pictures. And what I'm trying to figure out, why do we force them to smile for the camera, to take this picture if they don't want to? I think maybe that's also something to think about.
It's so fascinating, so my 6-year-old, she sometimes, so we'll be on the beach and she'll say to me, look here, and she'll pose. She's got quite a personality. She said, look here, take a picture, or she'll have a pose. And then I'll say, oh, I don't have my phone with me. And then I think to myself, have I actually bred that? Because have I actually
created that?
Because we have taken a picture every time she does something cute, have I actually bred that? But anyway, it was a fantastic interview. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a privilege to learn from you. Honestly, like your wisdom, and just learning about your journey and your family and how you do things at home. I really appreciate your time. It really does take a village to raise a child. So it's so nice just to learn from other parents and understand what you do, and how you get it right and sometimes wrong, and how that's okay as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Milan. Then I just wanted to tell all the parents at home. So we have got a very exciting promotion running in April. You can win one of these amazing My Story Tribe journals, and a Screen Smarts course in digital kindness. So please keep an eye on our social pages for that. It's going to hit just in time for the April holidays.